Hello, Thames Valley Police, Nicole speaking.
Yeah, hello. I'd like to make an appointment to come in regarding an incident that occurred yesterday.
Okay. Can I ask what the incident was?
It's of a domestic issue.
Right, okay. So you wanted to make an appointment to speak to someone about it?
Yes.
When a strange but eerily calm 999 call came in on the 1st of November 2010 from Robert Brown, claiming he wanted to come into the police station to speak with officers, red flags were immediately raised.
Could you just explain to me what the situation is?
Well, I've spoken to my lawyer and he said not to say anything, so...
Can I ask why he said that?
The incident's of a serious nature.
Can I ask what it is? How serious?
I really don't want to say anything, actually.
Can I ask why? I mean, this is confidential. This is between me and you.
Well, because it's extremely serious.
I'm assuming it's regarding with your ex-partner.
Yes.
Okay.
He refused to share much information, claiming his lawyer had advised against it, but he did admit it involved his ex-wife, Joanna Brown. Joanna had been reported missing earlier that morning after she didn't drop her children off at school. Was Joanna okay, or had Robert Brown harmed her?
I mean, you're both okay, are you? You're not. None of you are harmed at all, are you?
Well, we have one person is.
Okay. Is that person seeking any medical attention? Do you know? Do they need it?
No.
Joanna Simpson was born to Diana Parks and Chris Simpson in York, Yorkshire. She attended York College for Girls before her family relocated to Laxey on the Isle of Man after her father sold his building firm. In Laxey, Joanna attended Buchan School before later transferring to a grammar school in Oxford. She went on to study business at the University of Bath. After completing her studies, Joanna established a highly successful 5-star bed and breakfast on the outskirts of Windsor Great Park in Ascot. Joanna was described by her loved ones as warm, optimistic, kind and loving. Her vivacious spirit and adventurous nature made her a beacon of positivity to those around her. Always up for new experiences, her zest for life was so evident she was once approached to star in a yogurt commercial. Joanna was a strong, dependable woman, someone you could always count on in times of need, the first person you'd call when you were in trouble. Joanna went on to marry, but the marriage lasted only 3 years. Despite the short duration, the couple parted ways on amicable terms. Once her divorce was finalized, one of her friends invited her out to South Africa, and on the journey out, she started talking with the pilot of the plane, Robert Brown. Robert Brown was a 747 captain for British Airways, a role he deeply cherished, viewing himself as the boss. Born in Edinburgh, Robert's father worked in shipyards, while his mother was employed by the Bank of Scotland. From a young age, Robert aspired to become a pilot, a dream he ultimately realized. Outside of aviation, he was passionate about running and had achieved notable success as a 3-time UK trail running champion. As a long-haul pilot, Robert frequently captained flights to destinations such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Hong Kong, relishing the responsibility and authority his position entailed. Joanna and Robert's relationship began as a whirlwind romance after meeting on the flight to South Africa. Robert proposed to Joanna in Hong Kong on Christmas Day, and just 2 months later, in February 1999, they were married in an intimate ceremony with only 20 guests.
Rob, you're a very lucky man. I also think that Joanna is a very lucky girl, because I don't know Rob terribly well, but my impression of him is that he is clever, honest, compassionate, loving, and a really nice person.
I have to sort of thank my mum and father. I'm sure you never thought you'd see the day when I get married, but I can't help being choosy. What's perfect.
For their honeymoon, the newlyweds returned to South Africa, but the trip marked a turning point. Robert's behaviour changed dramatically. He was rude to hotel staff, leaving Joanna unsettled. She confided in her mother during the honeymoon, expressing deep regret and admitting she believed she had made a terrible mistake. Despite her misgivings, Joanna soon discovered she was pregnant. At 35 and longing to start a family, she decided to stay in the marriage, determined to make it work. After the birth of their son, Alex, Joanna and Robert quickly welcomed a daughter, Katie. Despite the growing family, the marriage was far from happy. Joanna, with her strong moral values, believed deeply in providing a safe, secure and loving environment for her children. Unfortunately, Robert's behaviour created the opposite atmosphere. Robert exerted coercive control over Joanna, isolating, intimidating, and at times verbally abusing her. His behaviour extended beyond their home. Colleagues noted his rudeness and alleged that he frequently dated flight attendants while married to Joanna. As the marriage deteriorated, Robert became increasingly paranoid and controlling, even accusing Joanna of having an affair. His jealousy culminated in a particularly frightening incident during the summer of 2007 when he confronted Joanna in the kitchen with a knife. Though she managed to defuse the situation and convince him to back down, that night was a turning point. Joanna decided she had endured enough and informed Robert that she was leaving. This marked the beginning of an acrimonious divorce process that spanned 3 years. From August 2007 onward, the proceedings were consumed by disputes over finances. Robert was fixated on the division of money, a battle complicated by a prenuptial agreement Joanna's father had wisely insisted upon before their marriage. He had foreseen the possibility of a troubled end to the relationship and sought to protect Joanna's successful business. As part of the divorce, Robert agreed to stay away from the family home for 6 months, a term later extended by another 6 months. However, unsettling events unfolded during this period. The CCTV system Joanna had installed stopped functioning after the cables were deliberately cut, and the security lights failed for the same reason. Evidence of Robert's controlling behaviour surfaced when he submitted a list of credit card transactions as part of the legal proceedings. These records revealed purchases of spy equipment, including a tracking device that he admitted to installing on Joanna's car. Joanna had bought the family home years earlier, transforming it from a dilapidated structure with trees growing through the ceiling into a beautiful residence, efforts she made long before meeting Robert. Despite his undertakings and the divorce proceedings, Robert's obsession with control over Joanna and her life became disturbingly clear, and he even managed to find out the code to her alarm system through their children, and he would often break into her home. As the months dragged on and the divorce proceedings seemed interminable, there was a glimmer of hope that resolution might finally be within reach. A court date for a final hearing was scheduled for November 8, 2010. By this point, however, Robert was in a new relationship and his girlfriend was 6 months pregnant, so everyone thought he had moved on and things would finally be finalized. On October 30th, 2010, with her children away with their father for half-term, Joanna used the quiet time to focus on preparing her divorce statement. In her words, she expressed the painful truth of her experience, saying, "I consider him to be controlling, intimidating, and a bully." Sadly, Joanna never made it to the scheduled court date. In a devastating turn of events, Robert decided to take matters into his own hands. On Halloween, October 31st, 2010, Robert was scheduled to return his children to Joanna's home after their half-term visit. Joanna, eager to see her children, had prepared a chicken curry, their favourite meal, and a chocolate cake. However, Robert repeatedly delayed their return, calling to push the drop-off time later and later. Finally, they agreed on 4 p.m. Joanna, frustrated and feeling down, confided in her close friend Hetty Barkworth Nanton. She expressed her concerns, saying she felt the divorce battle wouldn't truly end, even with the upcoming court date a week away. She feared Robert would find another avenue to continue tormenting her, perhaps through a custody battle. When Robert finally arrived at the house, he uncharacteristically entered with the children. Normally, he would simply drop them off and leave. The children ran into the family room while Joanna and Robert remained in the hallway. A heated argument ensued, during which Robert retrieved a claw hammer from their daughter Katie's bag and brutally attacked Joanna. He struck her 14 times with the hammer. The children in the next room cowered in fear as they heard the horrific blows. Katie later described the sounds as bang, bang, bang. Once certain Joanna was dead, Robert carried her body to the back of his Volvo, covering it with plastic sheeting. The children saw their father carrying their mother outside, noticing one of her limbs dangling. When Robert returned to the house, the children asked what was happening. As he drove off, with his children in the back seat, his son Alex asked, "Are you going to take Mummy to the hospital?" Robert didn't reply. Robert first dropped the children at his home with his current partner. He then collected items from his garage, including duct tape, forensic overalls, and plastic overshoes, before disappearing for 12 hours. He had switched off his phone and drove to Windsor Great Park, where he buried Joanna's body. He placed her in a makeshift coffin lined with plastic sheets and buried the hammer and other incriminating items alongside her. The following day, Monday, November 1st, Joanna's friends were alarmed when they received a call from her children's school reporting that Alex and Katie had not been dropped off that morning. Everyone knew immediately that something was wrong. Joanna would never willingly leave her children. That same morning, Robert called the police to report a domestic incident in one of the strangest calls I have ever heard.
Hello, Thames Valley Police, Nicole speaking.
Yeah, hello. I'd like to make an appointment to come in regarding an incident that occurred yesterday.
Okay. Can I ask what the incident was?
It's of a domestic issue.
Right, okay. So you wanted to make an appointment to speak to someone about it?
Yes.
During the call, Robert carefully chose his words, avoiding any self-incrimination.
Can you just explain to me what the situation is?
Well, I've spoken to my lawyer and he said not to say anything, so...
Can I ask why he said that?
The incident's of a serious nature.
Can I ask what it is? How serious?
I really don't want to say anything, actually.
Can I ask why? I mean, this is confidential. This is between me and you.
Well, because it's extremely serious.
He vaguely mentioned wanting to set up a meeting to discuss something serious that had happened, but refused to provide further details, even as the dispatcher pressed him for answers.
I'm assuming it's regarding with your ex-partner?
Yes.
Okay. And the incidents occurred recently?
Yes, last night.
Right. And you're both okay, are you? You're not. None of you are harmed at all, are you?
Well, we have one person is.
Okay. Is that person seeked any medical attention? Do you know? Do they need it?
No.
No. When you say serious, okay, and I'm only going by assumption, I'm assuming it's something that you have seeked because you're worried about the consequences.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. And you wanted to come to the station?
Yes, indeed.
Sensing something was amiss, the dispatcher instructed Robert to come to the Windsor police station as soon as possible.
Windsor's your local one, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll get an officer to attend there to meet you, to discuss it.
Right.
Okay, because unfortunately I can't get any appointments for today, but due to what you're telling me, I think we need to speak to you today.
Yeah, I'll come in, don't worry.
Okay.
I'll be there.
We'll see you shortly.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
When Robert arrived at the station, officers were already aware that Joanna was missing and an investigation had begun. Police visited Joanna's home and immediately began searching for clues. They found traces of blood inside the house and on the gravel outside, near Joanna's car. Joanna's mother, upon hearing about the blood, immediately declared, "Robert's killed her." Robert was taken into custody, but his silence left investigators frustrated.
You've been arrested this morning on suspicion of the murder of Joanna Brown. Have you had enough time to discuss matters with your solicitor?
I have.
Joanna is missing. Blood has been found at her home, Tongue Cottage. Robert, tell us everything you know about the whereabouts of Joanna.
No comment.
Despite being the one to contact the police, Robert refused to cooperate during his initial interview.
But you've continued to want to speak to police and to come to the police station. Is that correct?
No comment.
He repeatedly answered questions with no comment and displayed an air of arrogance.
Tell us everything you know about any injuries that Joanna has sustained.
No comment.
Have you killed her?
No comment.
Although he had turned himself in, he did not reveal Joanna's whereabouts or provide any useful information.
You've phoned up the police wanting to speak to a police officer. We're here now, okay? We are here now to speak to you. All right, you've made that call. We didn't phone you. You've made that call. All right, we're here now to speak to you. All right, you've obviously made that call for a reason. You wanted to speak to someone. Speak to us. So that's why we're here.
Well, no comment.
The next day, November 2nd, Robert was interviewed again by Officer Melanie Savage.
Today is Tuesday, 2nd of November, 2010. Purpose of this interview is some background information. We're going to ask you questions about yourself.
Switching tactics, she focused on Robert's personal life as she got a feeling of arrogance from him, so was sure he would enjoy talking about himself.
Running.
Yeah.
Enjoy running. Quite a passion of mine anyway, so I'm quite interested.
I've always been a runner since university days and been reasonably good at it as well, actually. Well, I've been UK trail champion 3 times, but I run every day and always have done.
Do you have set routes that you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's structured.
Are they all local?
It's structured, yeah. You know, if you run, you have certain places you're going to do.
What sort of distances do you do a day?
I'd always want to do 50 miles a week, but I mean, I never do that anymore.
Tell me about your family.
Well, from Edinburgh.
Yeah.
My parents are, now retired. My father was, he originally worked in the shipyards.
And your mum?
Well, she worked in a bank. She worked for the Bank of Scotland.
They then shifted the focus to his relationship with Joanna, prompting him to talk about how they got together, during which he portrayed her in a very negative light.
She just got divorced. She was what we call a Klingon, which is nothing to do with Star Trek, but it's family members who come with you on a trip. So I moved down September 98. I mean, I moved in as of council tax records will show, if you want to be pedantic.
Is that a house you've both bought together?
No, it wasn't. That was bought with her first husband. I know it sounds all very...
Yeah, there's romance coming here, Hong Kong.
I was in Hong Kong for Christmas. That was my Christmas trip. And we got engaged on Christmas Day. She lies to someone and then they do the dirty work for her. That's the way she operates as a person. You could say that a spoiled child, if you like, when your father gives you a Volkswagen Scirocco to go to school. If you remember earlier, I said I moved in September. And then she suggested she came off the pill in sort of November. A few days later, she said, I'm not getting pregnant without being married. And that was a marriage proposal from Princess Perfect.
This approach got him talking, but his ramblings centred on how he believed he had been wronged into the divorce and how she had allegedly cheated on him.
I phoned up one of her friends, Belinda, and I said to her, is Joe having an affair? And she denied it, but I knew she was having an affair, but I just didn't know who it was. My next trip, I went to Hong Kong, and when I came back from that, that's when I found out who she was having the affair with. And I knew, because they drink, they have wine. I'd say, I'll come around and pick you up. I'm just in the house. But all my texts and calls were ignored. And then eventually, she pitched up. I took the kids and put them to bed, and I said to Katie, I said, who else was there? There's no reason for him to be there unless his reason is because Joe's there, and that's how they were meeting.
He then continued describing the recent incident that had previously occurred between them, but denied that it had gotten too serious.
She denied that anything had been going on. And then we had a sort of a bit of an argument. But what has made it doubly bad and how it's made everything so much more worse is that she wanted me out of the house. And what happened is that she alleged that I threatened her with a knife at that time when I confronted her, which didn't happen.
But the police involved?
No, the police were never involved. No, I mean, not at all. I mean, nothing happened.
She never contacted the police?
No. And she knew what she was doing because she had no grounds for divorce, and she came up with that.
Robert then shifted the conversation to their finances, continuing to obsess over the money, the trust funds, and how Joanna's father had unfairly pressured them into signing a prenup.
It all involves trust funds and Isle of Man, which obviously my ex-wife sort of benefits from. Never saw any financial documents or whatever. I just went by what Joe would tell me. And this letter, I don't know why she did this. She just it must have got lost in a pile, but she put it in my office. And And normally I just file all the things. But this letter quantified the trust fund, saying it was worth 25 million. She obviously didn't tell me.
Certainly quite complex.
Well, I mean, you have to look at our dozens of bank accounts. And so it's a money trail. I had nothing to hide. I get my salary and it's in black and white. I had no assets whatsoever. Everything entirely. And my money each month is going into a bank account and being spent.
Were you over this prenup then?
Well, you see, I said no. And she said, you best do what he wants. It'll be better in the long run. Her father's there. It was just to please everybody in a way. That's why I signed it. And then I went off to Antigua next day for 6 days. That's why this divorce has taken so long, is because it involves prenups and it's been delayed and delayed.
When's your next court date?
Well, I was meant to be the High Court Monday.
Yes.
No, this Monday coming.
8th.
Yeah.
But still, he refused to admitting to harming Joanna or knowledge of her location. With Robert withholding crucial information, police turned to the children for answers. Alex, traumatized by the events, was unable to be interviewed. However, 9-year-old Katie bravely recounted what she had witnessed. Through tears, she told investigators about a fight she heard between her parents on October 31st. Katie said they got into a fight and they were hitting each other. And then Dad put Mum in the car and said he had hurt her. He said he was taking Mum to the hospital, but I don't know what happened. He came back at 7 in the morning, but I don't know about Mum. Officers decided to show the footage of Katie's heartbreaking interview to Robert, hoping it would convince him to reveal the truth.
What we're going to do is just show you an extract of that interview. Okay? Before we do, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, not really. Do I have to see the interview?
Well, we're going to show it to you.
Despite watching his daughter sobbing uncontrollably, describing the traumatic events, Robert sat stone-faced, staring straight ahead without any visible reaction.
And then what happened? They got into a fight and they were hitting each other. Dad, Mum said he really hurt. He came back and said, I don't know about Mum.
I think Catherine, she needs to know where her mum is.
Sorry, no comment.
Is there anything you want to say about what Catherine has said?
No comment.
Is she lying?
No comment.
Has she made that up?
No comment.
If she is lying, can you think of any reason why she would be?
No comment.
We all have good days and bad days, don't we? Was Sunday a good day or?
Pressured.
Is this because of the
Everybody's demanding from me.
So you've arrived at Hunt Cottage.
We're getting to the stage where I'm getting a block. I don't want to say anything else.
We know Joe is there. How long would you say you were talking for?
No comment.
Did you talk about the court case?
No comment.
Was there anything else that you were talking about?
I'll answer that. It wasn't a court case, it was about the children.
Can you tell me what you were talking about?
Schools.
Schools. Tell me more.
Finally, during an interview on November 3rd, Robert asked to take a 20-minute break to consult with his lawyer.
Can I speak to you?
Yes.
When he returned to the interview room, a statement was read. In the statement, Robert claimed that he and Joanna had gotten into a fight, during which he had pushed her, causing her death.
It says, when I returned the children, I had an argument with Joe concerning schools. This was after 3 years of acrimonious court proceedings and a long history of interference with contact to my children. Eventually, I lost control and pushed her. What happened next, I do not clearly remember. She was injured. I placed her in my car in the back and took the children to my house where my girlfriend was able to look after them. I was intending to take her to hospital. I do not know why I did not call an ambulance. I discovered she was dead and panicked. I tried to hide her in a box from the garden centre and buried her in Windsor Great Park. I would be prepared to show officers where this is.
It's a horrible mess. I'm not proud of myself.
Very difficult to cope with.
In another interview the following day, he explained more, claiming that he had no clear memory of the event, still trying to portray himself as the victim.
What was your state of mind?
Even in my head, it's difficult to sort of put things together now from when I just lost it. I can't really from that point say at the moment to you what happened with any surety. Everything in my head's all mixed up. I'm not sure what things happened, what I did.
Is there anything that you do remember? Any flashbacks that you're getting?
I think I prefer to say no comment at the present time until I've tried to work things out for myself. I don't think I can really say anything at the moment. So, it's like a pub, isn't it? And everybody's got their tipping over point. If you add in all the lawyer stuff, the school stuff, the financial stuff, the next court case, the kids get on your back, all the stuff you got to do, suddenly.
Were you thinking at this point, Robert, whether it's logical or sensible or rational, were you thinking at this point that you could get away with this?
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
He then disclosed where he had hidden her body, in Windsor Great Park.
It is very steep in places and rocky, and it's not managed, so there's big trees down there, branches everywhere.
How did you get Joe down there?
Well, I just dragged.
Okay.
Downhill.
So there won't be any sort of drag marks for them to look for?
I think what you'll find is it's all leaves everywhere, so I'd be extremely surprised if there's any marks.
Now, you've mentioned a box.
Yeah.
Is Joe in the box? Yeah. What type of box is it?
It's a garden box.
You say you tried to hide her in a box from a garden centre. Obviously, that time of night, garden centres aren't open. Tell me where you got that box from.
No comment.
Had you already worked out what you were going to do?
No comment.
Police rushed to the park to locate Joanna's body, but were initially unsuccessful. Robert then agreed to accompany officers to the park and led them directly to the burial site. 5 days after her brutal murder, Joanna's body was finally recovered.
Police were today scouring the dense woods of Windsor Great Park in their hunt for Joanna Brown's body.
Deep inside Crown Estate woodland, the isolated area just south of Legoland, a police forensic tent has been set up at least a mile from the nearest road.
She had been wrapped and bent into a large plastic garden box buried beneath the earth. The makeshift coffin was lined with plastic sheeting to prevent seepage and covered with soil. The post-mortem examination revealed the extent of Joanna's injuries. She had defensive wounds on her hands and arms, as well as multiple fractures to her skull, cheeks and nose, evidence of the violent attack she had endured. The brutality was clear, and it was obvious that she had fought desperately to defend herself. The location of her grave was chillingly strategic. As officers stood at the site, they noticed planes flying overhead. The area was a well-known flight path, and as a seasoned pilot, Robert would have been familiar with how secluded and hidden it was, an ideal location to conceal a body. When the children learned where their mother had been found, they were heartbroken to recognize the spot. It was an area they knew well, where they had played with their father and built a den in the weeks leading up to Joanna's death. It was later concluded that Robert had dug the grave weeks in advance, carefully measuring it to the exact dimensions of the garden box he used to bury Joanna. Robert Brown's trial commenced on May 2011 at Reading Crown Court, where he denied murder and admitted to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. His defense presented a psychiatric report asserting that Robert was suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the killing. Robert claimed that the stress of the ongoing divorce, compounded by his new partner's miscarriage, triggered an adjustment disorder, an emotional disturbance that impaired his ability to function normally. One psychiatrist supported this claim. In court, Robert portrayed himself as a victim, arguing that he had been stitched up by a prenuptial agreement that excluded him from accessing Joanna's trust fund. He described the divorce proceedings as deeply unfair, claiming that Joanna had railroaded him into marriage and that she constantly made him feel as though everything he did was wrong. Taking the stand, Robert appeared confident and used his time to vilify Joanna, painting her as the villain in their relationship. His testimony consumed much of the trial, with Robert focusing on his perceived grievances and portraying himself as the true victim. At times, he sobbed openly on the stand, though many observers felt his emotional display was exaggerated and lacked authenticity. Joanna's best friend, Hetty Barkworth Nanton, remarked on how much of the trial seemed centered around Robert's account, rather than on the horrific crime he had committed, and how his narrative aimed to shift blame onto Joanna. She said, "He was charming, he cried, he got the jury's sympathy. He was the airline pilot trusted with the safety of hundreds of passengers. If he'd been able to wear his uniform, he would have." The whole stance of his evidence was that Joe was a rich bitch who had led him to do this. He said Joe had an affair, which wasn't true, and now she was hiding money and taking him to the cleaners. He even said, "I knew there was a problem in my marriage when I didn't get my usual birthday present." By that, he meant a blowjob. There were so many times when he was talking that I was just shaking my head, yet he was never challenged. Robert testified that he didn't intend to kill Joanna and claimed he had no memory of the actual murder. He admitted to taking a hammer from his house and putting it in Katie's bag, but couldn't explain why he did so. Robert said that when he arrived at Joanna's house to drop off the children, they started arguing about medication. He claimed that he went to Katie's bag to get the medication, and after that, he couldn't remember or explain anything else. Robert also admitted that after disposing of Joanna's body, he realized he was still holding the CCTV system and the hammer used in the attack. He said he buried these somewhere in Windsor Great Park, but they have never been found. While Robert acknowledged that he had pre-dug the hole where Joanna's body was buried, he claimed it was for a completely different purpose, to hide files, court papers, and other items related to the divorce. The prosecution refuted Robert's defense of suffering from an adjustment disorder, arguing that this diagnosis was a minor form of disorder, rarely associated with violence. Another psychiatrist testified that Robert's actions, including dismantling the CCTV system immediately after the killing, did not align with someone incapacitated by a mental disorder. This left the jury to decide which psychiatric evaluation to believe. In the end, the jury sided with Robert, swayed by the detailed account of his story and the defense's claims about his mental state. He was found not guilty of murder after the jury was told that the couple's bitter divorce proceedings had placed him under immense stress. Despite this, he was sentenced for manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, based on a psychiatric report stating he suffered from an adjustment disorder. Joanna's loved ones were devastated by the verdict. Her close friend, Hetty Barkworth Nanton, said, "No matter how devastating it was, we thought, thank goodness there's all this evidence. There's no way he'll get away with it." After the verdict, I can remember looking down and feeling like there was a big dark hole opening up that I was falling into. Their daughter, Katie, wrote to the judge in the trial saying, "My father killed my mummy, and I'm scared if he comes out of jail too soon, he might come back and hurt me because I heard him killing my mummy. He is the most evilest man I have ever known, and I wish he wasn't my father." At sentencing, Judge Mr. Justice Cook himself seemed to express doubts. He said, "An adjustment disorder is a mild disturbance which rarely leads to outbursts of violence. In your case, it appears to have disappeared almost immediately after killing your wife. You intended to kill, you intended to conceal the body and to hide the evidence of the killing. You never called an ambulance or took her to hospital, and in my judgment, you never had any intention to do so. Indeed, you took her body to a remote part of Windsor Great Park in the car, and then carried her body and put it into a garden box in a hole that you had dug previously, having left a spade nearby wrapped in tarpaulin. Had you denied manslaughter, the longest sentence I could give is 36 years imprisonment. Bearing in mind your early guilty plea, I sentence you to 24 years in prison. You were angry at the way in which she conducted the divorce. You were angry because you felt she wasn't giving you any say in your children's education. You took the hammer with you, hidden in your children's homework bag. Striking her 14 times was done with the intent of killing her. The box had been put in place for one reason. In the end, Robert Brown was sentenced to 24 years for manslaughter and an additional 2 years for obstructing a coroner, bringing the total to 26 years.
As he stood in the dock, Brown shook his head in disbelief as he was sentenced to 26 years in jail. He was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Because Robert Brown was convicted of manslaughter rather than murder, the sentence was determinate rather than a life sentence with a minimum term. This distinction meant that Robert Brown would be entitled to automatic release after serving half of his sentence, provided he committed no further crimes. As a result, Robert Brown was set for automatic release in November 2023, without the need for parole hearings or any risk assessment to determine whether he remains a danger to society.
Robert Brown is an intelligent man who has had 5 months on remand to contrive a cunning plan to make out he was suffering from diminished responsibility.
After serving half of his 26-year sentence for manslaughter, Robert Brown was initially due for automatic release in November 2023. However, Joanna's family, led by her mother, Diana Parks, and best friend, Hetty Barkworth-Nanton, fought tirelessly to prevent this from happening.
I fear he was a danger to anybody he came in contact with, as Joe's friends, my family, and any woman that he may get a relationship with in the future. He was so dangerous. He was a psychopath. He is a psychopath. He showed no remorse whatsoever for what he's done. None. Absolutely none. He told the Kafkas officer in Bullingdon prison that he would tell the children why he killed their mother when he was released.
They met with Justice Secretary Alex Chalk and his predecessor Dominic Raab, urging them to intervene. In October 2023, Justice Secretary Chalk took action by referring the case to the parole board, requiring a decision on whether Robert Brown could be safely released from prison, this move effectively blocking his automatic release the following month. Justice Secretary Chalk said, "Joanna Simpson was bludgeoned and buried at the hands of Robert Brown, which left 2 children without a mother and caused irreparable harm to her family and loved ones. I made a commitment to Joanna's family that I would give this case my closest personal attention. Having reviewed all the information available to me, I have blocked Brown's automatic release and referred this case to the parole board using powers we introduced to protect the public from the most dangerous offenders."
So this was an absolutely appalling case. Anybody who's heard about the story of Robert Brown and Joanna Simpson cannot fail to be affected by the appalling nature of it and how harrowing it is. And I pay tribute to Joanna's mother and to Joanna's friends for the tireless campaign they've made. So I made an undertaking to them that I would do everything I properly and lawfully could to ensure that justice was done in this case. And that's why, using the powers that are available under the 2022 Act, I have exercised my discretion to block his automatic release, which would otherwise have happened. His case will now be referred to the parole board for them to make a determination about whether he's safe to be released. So he would otherwise have walked out, made this decision. That was the right one to do, having considered all the evidence personally and with care.
Joanna's mother, Diana Parks, said, "It is an incredible joy, but unfortunately it isn't over yet. We still have to go through the parole board and hope that they see how wicked Brown is and give the right decision. Brown committed the most horrific crime against my loving and caring daughter Jo. He must be kept in prison. It's pretty emotionally exhausting going through all this and having to relive the death of Jo for the children as well. So we are very hopeful that things will get better for us now. We're just rejoicing at the moment and praying for the best. We hope that the parole board will appreciate how dangerous Robert Brown is, and we fear for the safety of our family, Joe's friends, and any female he may form a relationship with in the future." Joanna's best friend, Hetty Barkworth-Nanton, said, "It's been a long fight. We've been living with this shadow over our lives for the last 12.5 years. This is a landmark decision, which has the potential to open up this new power to other dangerous offenders on determinate sentences who chose not to engage in rehabilitation, which is all too common in cases of serious and fatal domestic abuse."
It's overwhelming, to be honest with you. It's the best news that we could have hoped for. I, for one, broke down because we've been living with this for the last 11 years, 12 years. It's been a shadow over our lives, and it's just the most incredible relief.
On February 14th, 2024, Robert Brown challenged the decision to block his automatic release at the High Court, applying for a judicial review of the Secretary of State's decision to refer his case to the parole board. Robert Brown's legal team argued that the referral was improperly motivated by political bias and influenced by a high-profile media campaign against his release. His lawyers claimed that his risk level had not increased and that Justice Secretary Alex Chalk's referral was unlawful. They described the decision as an attempt to reverse engineer justification for blocking Robert's automatic release, asserting that it was driven by pressure from politicians and the public. The government's lawyers countered these claims, stating that Robert had persistently refused to engage in the rehabilitative elements of his sentence. In dismissing Robert's appeal, Mr. Justice Ritchie ruled that there were good grounds for believing that Robert posed a high risk to the public of serious harm and required a full and proper risk assessment. The Ministry of Justice also rejected allegations of political motivation, maintaining that Mr. Chalk's decision was lawful and aligned with public safety concerns. The decision on whether to release Robert Brown now rested with the parole board, and it was determined that the discussions would take place behind closed doors. This decision deeply angered Joanna Simpson's family, who had campaigned tirelessly for transparency in the case. They argued that the severity of Brown's crime and the public interest demanded an open process. Joanna's mother, Diana Parks, expressed her frustration, saying, "We have given up all our rights to privacy, to do everything that we can to make sure this evil man stays behind bars. Why should Brown get to keep his privacy? I truly hope that the parole board can still see that Brown is a dangerous man and does not let him out." Sadly, everything seems to be in favor of the perpetrator. The safety of the victims is put below the safety of the offender. As of now, no specific information has been made public regarding when the parole board will review Robert Brown's case, with only the vague statement that it would happen in due course. Following Joanna's tragic murder, her mother, Diana Parks, and her best friend, Hetty Barkworth Nanton, established a foundation in Joanna's name to support children affected by domestic abuse and homicide. The foundation's website reflects Joanna's strong moral values and states that its work is based on her beliefs, values, and the love of her children. Hetty Barkworth Nanton has also dedicated herself to campaigning on domestic abuse issues.
Domestic abuse people used to be called domestic violence, and people still to this day think, well, if I'm not being hit, then I'm not a victim of domestic abuse. We still, at Refuge, get calls to the National Domestic Abuse Helpline where people say, I don't think I'm a victim of abuse, but can I just talk to you? And they paint this horrific story of what they're enduring. Joe was never subject to violence. He threatened her with a knife once, but other than that, it was all coercive and controlling behaviour. And they'd been 3 years post-separation. So, her case is a really important one for people to see, to understand the nuances of domestic abuse, and that actually non-violent domestic abuse can often be the most dangerous. So that anyone who sees it and resonates with anything that they see, please reach out and
You say the most dangerous in the sense as well that it's a red flag.
Absolutely massive red flag.
Okay.
Huge.
She is now the chair of Refuge, a leading domestic abuse charity. In this role, she has tirelessly advocated for systemic changes, including the introduction of an automatic 25-year minimum sentence for domestic homicides, with explicit exclusions for victims of domestic abuse or violence who might kill their abuser in self-defense. Reflecting on the state of the justice system, Hetty expressed skepticism about significant improvements, even though coercive control became a criminal offence in 2015, 4 years after Robert Brown's trial. She said, "These partial defences of diminished responsibility were introduced in the 1950s when we needed a defence to ensure that people who weren't evil were not sentenced to death. I'm of the view that they are now abused by men who kill their wives. They are effectively saying, 'She drove me to it,' in various guises, and then it becomes a trial of the victim." She also highlighted the misuse of partial defences in cases where men claim a partner died during sex gone wrong. Hetty calls for mandatory reviews before the release of all those convicted of domestic homicide, stating, "The reason we're campaigning is not because we want justice for Joe. We'll never get that. It's not because we're angry and think it's not fair. It's purely because he's a danger. We shouldn't be in a situation where we need to campaign actively in public in order to keep people safe." Both Hetty Barkworth Nanton and Diana Parks have been recognised for their tireless work and advocacy by being appointed Commanders of the Order of the British Empire, CBE. The CBE, or the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, is one of the United Kingdom's highest honours, rewarding exceptional contributions to the arts, sciences, charitable and welfare organisations, and public service outside the civil service. Diana Parks described the honour as a huge surprise and said, "Whilst this honour is an occasion to celebrate, it is bittersweet, as this would not have been possible had my daughter Jo not been brutally killed. With this honour, I vow to continue to raise awareness about the impact of domestic violence and homicide on children, as well as violence against women." Hetty Barkworth Nanton said, "I was deeply moved and overwhelmed when I found out I was going to receive this honour. It would not be happening, and I would not be doing my work, were it not for my beautiful friend Joanna Simpson. Alex and Katie, Joanna's children, have shown remarkable resilience in the face of tragedy. Following their mother's murder, they asked to live with their grandmother, Diana Parks, on the Isle of Man. Under Diana's care, they both found the strength to rebuild their lives, eventually attending university and earning degrees. At the age of 23, Alex publicly expressed his deep concerns about his father, Robert Brown, saying that he never wanted to see him again and believed he could claim more victims. He said, "I am most of all concerned for my maternal grandparents who cannot defend themselves. I do not want to live with this perpetual fear that I will lose yet more of my close family."
When you say that you fear his release because he's still dangerous, what do you think he might do?
I don't really know, but I've said I hope he comes to kill me first so that all my family and Hetty and Belinda and, in fact, women in general will be safe, because he's a psychopath, in my opinion. And unfortunately, when he took a knife to my daughter in 2007, he told her that he'd hated our family for the 8 years they were married. I'm going to be 85 in May, and I've lived my life, and my family, they're fearful. My granddaughter, my grandson, my son, his family, we're all terrified.
Joanna's brutal death at the hands of her estranged husband, Robert Brown, not only stole a loving mother from her 2 young children, but also forever altered the lives of everyone who knew and loved her. For her children, Alex and Katie, the trauma of witnessing their father commit such a horrific act has left scars that may never fully heal. They lost both parents that day, one to violence, the other to prison. Yet, their courage in rebuilding their lives, supported by the unwavering strength of their grandmother, Diana Parks, is a testament to their resilience and courage. Diana and Hetty's fight to keep Robert behind bars, even as he seeks release, underscores the failures of a system that often prioritizes the rights of perpetrators over the safety of victims and their loved ones. I hope that the outcome of the parole board is in Joanna and her loved ones' favour, and my heart goes out to each and every one of them. And as always, rest in peace, Joanna Simpson.